New Thought Media Network proudly presents A Science of Mind Saturday Conversations. Learn more about the Science of Mind philosophy, faith, and way of life. Join our team of experts for a weekly deep dive discussion. Come study the science of mind, chapter by chapter, and resources from the Science of Mind archives. Plan to join us every Saturday, 9 a.m. Mountain Time, only on the New Thought Media Network.
Good morning, everybody. Mark Gilbert here, and it's great to be back with you again on the Saturday morning Science of Mind and Spirit Conversation show. And thank you for joining us, whether you're with us live this morning or whether you're watching the recording after the fact. For all you time shifters out there, if you are watching live, I would invite you to throw your name and location into the comment field and whatever platform you're watching, so it can show up here and I can acknowledge you. And also, as we move along today through today's conversation, I hope that you are feel compelled to ask some questions. So be sure to throw some questions and comments down into the field. And one of the things we're going to be looking at today is the chapter 3 out of the Science of Mind textbook, not to be confused with part 3 of the introduction, which many people often confuse the first 4 chapters of Science of Mind with the first 4 sections of the introduction. But we're really into the chapters of the book now and looking at the chapter entitled Spirit. So we're going to be talking about spirit this morning, and hope that you find it engaging and interesting, and there's something new for you to take on into your awareness. I would invite you to, as we begin, to think about what is spirit? How would you define spirit? And have that idea in your mind. So as I go through some of the words of Holmes and some of my thoughts regarding the ideas of spirit, then you can mix and match that with your own ideas and think of how what you're hearing today might strengthen, reinforce, bring you new insights and things of that nature. So it looks to be a fun morning. I did want to start this morning with just a question. And the question is, what brings you joy? What brings you joy? Now, you may wonder, why am I starting a discussion of spirit with a discussion or a recognition of things that are joyful? And I think there is a connection, which I will attempt to make in a few minutes. But what I'd like to know is if there's anything specifically that brings you joy, to be sure and think about that and just think about what brings me joy. Now, there's things that are in my life that bring me joy continuously. And those include my wife, my dog, my car. I drive an old Jeep Wrangler, and it just brings me joy to jump into it with my dog Penny, my chocolate lab, taking her for walks, watching her excitement and joy, her tail wagging. All of that just brings me joy. And what brings you joy? That's the question I want you to contemplate for a moment as we think about spirit. Again, if you're joining us live, drop your name and your location into the comment field so I'll know where you are and who's watching live. That said, I also want you to contemplate the meaning of joy, what joy is for you. And I listed a few things a second ago in terms of my Jeep, my wife, my dog, things that bring me joy. One of the things that brought me joy this past week, been watching a lot of the Winter Olympics, and there was a young lady, Alyssa Lewis, I think was her name, who won the gold medal. And I don't know if you've watched it or listened to her story about how she was, a figure skater, got so involved in the pressures of figure skating that she had to step away from it for several years and then come back to it with a new appreciation, that she had to go out and taste some of the other experiences of life and then come back and recognize that how much figure skating brought her joy and that she now brings that joy to her figure skating. Well, that's, I think, a lesson for all of us to look at our lives and ask us what brings us joy. It's much like if you remember the Marie Kondo material for how to sort your house and clean your house up. She was always asking before you threw anything away that you analyzed, does this spark joy? And I think that's a great way of looking at our life as these human being and this human experience, as spiritual beings moving through a human experience, to ask what is it in this human experience brings us joy. And so I would invite you to think about what brings you joy. Now, the reason I bring this up and start about it is because Ernest Holmes in The Science of Mind, it doesn't stress this, but in a lot of his later writings and talks, he liked to quote the Indian teacher Sri Aurobindo in reference to the fact that why do we exist? We exist for the bliss of the divine. That's an experience that, or a statement that Aurobindo would make. What is the divine? The divine is spirit. That's where we're going with this. And spirit is that essence behind everything, and that our existence, our very nature of experiencing ourselves as these lives, as myself as Mark and you as you, is for the bliss of some field of energy, some intelligent field that we call spirit or God or the divine, the all. There's so many names for that essence that rest behind this totality of our experience. But our lives are experiences for that entity, spirit. And so I would invite you to think about what is it that brings you joy, and to also see how you are bringing more joy into your life. Now, you may say, well, a lot of times when people hear that phrase, they'll jump into, well, what about all the negative stuff in life? And is that bringing bliss to the divine? And although that's a greater topic than I really want to get into today, I will say yes, that ultimately the things that from our human's perspective that don't bring us individually the sense of joy or things that we judge as negative, ultimately at the highest levels of spirit, beyond the comprehension of what we can experience in our limited perspective, that the play out of positive and negative and things that we see as right and wrong really are serving a greater purpose for the spirit to experience all aspects of itself through the experiences of the goodness and less than goodness, and through that, the contrast of those two. So we are bringing that about. Shay, great to see you with us. And what brings you joy? Cooking, swimming, meditation, nature, sports, music, friends, art, eating. Yes, agree with so much of that. Again, if you're watching live, drop a comment where you're from, your name, what brings you joy. Also be thinking about what is spirit for you. I'm going to do a little bit of a, if you've come on these Saturday mornings where I've been presenting, I often share a lot of quotes with you. And the quotes come from the section that we're looking at, which is chapter 3, Spirit and Science of Mind textbook. But I'm going to get into some prerequisite stuff before we get into spirit. I really want you to be focusing on what is spirit to you? What is spirit to you? Keeping in mind that your very existence is here through the experiences of things that bring you joy and bliss as an experience for the divine to experience those things through you. So everything that you do, every interaction, including this interaction right now, is an experience of the divine. I am God talking to God, that this technology that we're using is God or spirit, a mechanism by which individual pockets of the one are communicating with one another and reminding each other of our ultimate truth of oneness. And so I want you to really embody that as you watch this presentation or interact this morning, and also to think about it in terms of if you're when you're watching the video as well. So let's jump into it. And one of the first things I want to show is something you may be familiar with. Now, I'm not going immediately to the chapter 3 of the textbook. I'm going to show you some things first. And the first one is this thing, which many of you are probably aware of. You know it as the Science of Mind teaching symbol. This comes from the back of the Science of Mind textbook. It relates to the fact that it breaks up spirit into 3 aspects: conscious mind or spirit at the top, something called soul or law in the middle, something called matter or body or form at the bottom. And what I want you to keep in mind is that when we talk about the word spirit, one of the things that can be confusing when you're reading Holmes is that he references spirit in different ways. So this chart, and when we study this in Science of Mind, and it's referred frequently to the teaching symbol outlining the process of creation in Science of Mind. It explains how creation occurs, that we consciously think thoughts, the top aspect of the chart. They're acted upon or reflected through a medium in the middle called soul, or often called law, and that the reflection results in form or matter. Now, I don't want to get too deeply into it, but I do want to call your attention, again, this is from the back of the textbook, that in that middle area, he also calls this mirror of mind, and at the bottom, he calls it mirror of matter. And then in that downward V thing, it calls it contemplative reflector. You see those terms, and a lot of time we skip over them and don't really dwell on them, but I do want you to think about the fact that everything is spirit or mind, everything, including, if you're looking at this chart, the aspect of what the paper that it's printed on or this screen that is displaying it is also spirit. Everything beyond the bounds of that circle is spirit. Everything within the big circle is spirit. So in one aspect or one awareness level, and one way in which Holmes writes about the word spirit, he's talking about the aspect of the all. That, and we're going to go through some quotes that show this, but he's really trying to get you to see that spirit equals God, equals mind, equals the thing behind everything, okay? And that then he tends to take that all, that spirit that is the all, and divide it into three characteristics and labels one of them spirit, which can be confusing when you're first coming to Science of Mind, because some of his writings refer to spirit as being everything, and then he breaks spirit up into three characteristics and calls one part of it spirit. So the spirit, that when he's talking about the creative process, he's talking about the conscious aspect of spirit, that part that is able to consciously think and to create through the process of coming up with an idea. So when you think of something in your mind and have conscious awareness, and that is the aspect that you are using of spirit. But again, everything is spirit. But that thought is then acted upon. It's reflected like by the mirror of our mind, or it's acted upon by a universal law or soul in that middle aspect to create our ultimate experience. And then that ultimate experience is what we often call form or body or the material world. But they're all mind, they're all spirit, they're all God. But when we look at the creative process, that aspect that where we creatively create through our conscious thinking, spirit creates through conscious thinking, or the quote unquote, the word, it is that aspect that comes up with the idea that is then acted upon. That's the setting consciousness or spirit in motion to allow it to create the experience of form or matter. So one way of looking at this chart is to think that spirit as conscious mind flows through a creative medium that acts upon it and creates the form. But another way of thinking about it is that creative mind or spirit creates the thought that is reflected much like a mirror, and that we then experience the reflection of the mirror in the mirror of matter, so that everything that you're sensing is a reflective mirror projection. Now, that much aligns with Plato's story of the parable of the cave, if you're familiar with that, where Plato basically stated that we're all like people locked down in a cave looking at reflections on the wall of the cave, and the truth is behind us. And if we think about the conscious mind behind us that is thinking the thoughts, and that they are moved along and reflected, much like on a movie screen, that the real bottom of this that we call physical matter is really, really a reflection. It's a reflection of mind. All right. I think I've dwelled on that enough. If you have questions about what I'm saying, drop them in there. But I want you to think about the key thing. The key takeaway is that everything behind and outside the circle and in the circle is spirit or mind. And that we often then divide it up as part of a description of the creative process. So how did Holmes define mind? Let's look at that. Here's a quote. This comes from the glossary of the textbook. I only give you a portion of the glossary textbook description, but it says spirit is defined as God, within whom all spirits exist. The self-knowing one, the conscious universe, the absolute. I love the word the absolute there. We're going to come back to that in a minute. Spirit in man is that part of him which enables him to know himself, that which he really is. We do not see the spirit of man any more than we see the spirit of God. We see what he does, but we don't see the doer. And think about that. Do you see your thoughts? Your thoughts and your conscious awareness that you are aware of in some sort of nebulous area. You tend to define it or locate it within your head, but is it really what we teach in Science of Mind, that it's part of a flow of energy, and that we live in a field of mind with a capital M, and that our thoughts are simply a movement within this field of mind. And we don't see our thoughts. And in a sense, they're part of when we break things into the material world, the non-material world, they're the non-material. The conscious thoughts and the actions upon our conscious thoughts all occur beyond the world of form, the world that we experience out there. They are really in part of the non-material. But everything, he's saying here, you can see everything is God, everything is spirit. And that's a key thing, because we're going to see some quotes in a minute, which says spirit is one part of something else. Well, everything is spirit in the big picture. That's what I want you to keep in mind. Now, I've put together some graphics I want to run through real quickly, and hopefully these are helpful for you. And if you watch the video of this, you might want to stop and reflect on some of these, because I'm going to go through them rather quickly, but they're going to build on the teaching symbol that we just went through and reflect and show it from another way, show it from another perspective, just to give you sort of an idea of how to understand Holmes, because he writes talking about different levels of perspective. Now, here's one way of looking at it. And it's a lot of words on the screen, and don't be overwhelmed by that. The key thing I want you to look at is at the very top of it, spirit or God, the very bottom of it, the material universe. And that as we look at that, well, I want you to imagine that that's like an energetic flow between the three. It's like a three-layered cake. At the bottom, there's a physical plane, the physical world we're working in. In the middle is a mental plane where our thoughts and conscious, our thinking occurs and the acts upon that thinking, but we can think about it like our thoughts. And at the top is the spiritual plane of God or spirit. And over to the right-hand side, in the boxes, are some terms that you'll encounter when you're reading Holmes that talk about those different levels. So when you see him referring to something called spirit or God, he's talking about the spiritual plane of life. When he talks about the all, the absolute, as we saw in that definition just a moment ago, the timeless, the eternal, the divine, the infinite, all of these refer to aspects that are outside the realm of this material universe. They're up in the realm of spirit. They're up in the realm of the all. And they are aspects that are transcendent of the material plane, the material world. Oftentimes in teachings, those words are referred to as the macrocosm of God, the macrocosm of spirit. So just to give you an example, up in the macrocosm of spirit, there is no time. We talk about it as eternity, or the eternal, or the timeless. There is no time there. There is no time experience. But down in the world of the material world, you'll see that it's time is part of that world. Up in the spirit or God realm, there is the infinite. There are no boundaries. Down in the world of the finite, we place boundaries around things so that I can say, oh, I've got my internal awareness, and there's the external world. There's me, there's you. Everything we divide up is subject-object. We begin by taking the very first thing that we divide up is ourselves and our unity with the divine from everything else in the universe, and say, this is me and the other is not me. And that's an essential piece of what we do, is to put boundaries around everything in the material universe. But the key point here is that we exist simultaneously in all of these, because everything is spirit and everything is mind and is flowing through us. And so the physical plane is our experience of the physical world, but we also have thoughts going on within us that are part of our awareness. That's where we said a moment ago in the quote from Holmes that that's where we know God is through our thoughts and conscious awareness. But we have this mental plane that's going on that is sort of a bridge between the physical plane and spirit or God. And the bottom area is often called the microcosm of the divine. Okay. So I'm going to throw some more words on the screen. Oh, and by the way, I left off the involution, evolution. Involution is just a process that the spirit or God involved itself or embedded itself in the entire physical universe. And everything that thinks it's physical, separate and apart is evolving back to returning and remembering its truth of oneness. So evolution is how we evolve back to knowing spirit. Spirit had embedded itself into us in evolution. We're evolving back to spirit through a process of evolution. In many traditions, and I see the charts throwing my tea and spirit off a little while, I'm just going to overlay that for a minute. You often talk in a lot of esoteric circles about body, mind, and spirit. That aligns to it. Body, mind, and spirit. That we can look at the body as the physical plane, the mind, the mental area. Spirit is the ultimate level. Those are three aspects of this one, taught in so many different traditions. Here's another way of looking at it. Same chart, but I've added some stuff on the difference on the sides. A lot of ways in which we look at it is we'll often talk about higher mind and lower mind. We might talk about chakras, where chakras would work up from lower level chakras to higher level chakras. We might talk about multiple bodies, where there is the physical form, and then we talk about certain subtle bodies and up into the higher spheres of being. So when we reference those multiple bodies, we're moving from lower states of consciousness to higher states of consciousness. It's a movement from the densest forms to the most ethereal forms at the top. And there is this flow from lower states. So when we talk about higher mind, lower mind, a lot of people in terms of transcendent experiences, we're moving up in levels of consciousness. You could overlay the things you may be familiar with. I'm just throwing a few out here for you. Maslow's hierarchy, when he talks about us moving through levels of needs, he begins with the lower levels of needs, and we move to higher states of needs. The lower levels of needs deal more with bodily needs, physical form needs. The higher states of Maslow's needs move into higher states of consciousness, where we start becoming concerned with flow states of experience and transcendent states of understanding and tasting spirit. Maslow's hierarchy very well aligns with this. We can look at the model of spiral dynamics, if you're familiar with that, where we move through levels of awareness or worldviews that start with lower levels and move to higher levels, where we see more unity and oneness at the higher levels. Ultimately, the higher state of evolution and spirit is moving towards the higher states, where we're evolving into a state of awareness of the oneness, but also how everything below it is part of that oneness. On the left-hand side of the screen, I talk about it in terms of vibratory rates, that at the most densest levels of materials of like rocks and minerals, they're vibrating at the lowest rates. And at the level of spirit, they're vibrating at the highest rates. And everywhere in between, we're vibrating at different levels. So you'll hear people who talk about these things from vibratory levels. If you're familiar with the Abraham Hicks material and how they like to lay out the spectrum of emotional states. That's rates, they tie that to vibratory rates. If you're familiar with the power versus force work of David Hawkins and his scores, where he does missile testing to create a range of things that vibrate at different levels of being, the highest rates are at the top. So we're always talking towards spiritual planes. And so what I'm trying to get you to see is that we are in a sort of a spectrum where we experience and float in our awareness through the multiple states of spectrum, but the entire spectrum itself is spirit. The entire spectrum is spirit. So that's what I want you to lock into. And that when Holmes talks about spirit, he talks about it in two levels. He talks about it, again, as spirit or God being the all that is everything. And then he talks about spirit as being one aspect of this entire thing that we're experiencing. So this universe, this three-layer cake I'm talking about spirit, mind, and body, the spiritual plane, the mental plane, the physical plane, they're all aspects of spirit. But spirit is also referred to by Holmes as the conscious awareness aspect of the spiritual plane. So hopefully that makes some sense. But the key thing to take away here is when you're reading Holmes and he uses the word spirit, you have to think about how is he using it in this moment? Because sometimes he's talking about it from the spirit or the all, God, the highest level of being, totality of all that is, the macrocosm itself. And sometimes he's talking about spirit as that aspect of conscious awareness that we experience through our conscious thinking. Okay, I think I beat the horse there. Hopefully you got what I'm talking about. All right, so let's go to some quotes by Holmes and look at those real briefly. This one says, the definition of spirit is life or intelligence, conceived of entirely apart from physical embodiment. It is a vital essence, force, energy as distinct from matter. So this is kind of an interesting one because he says that it's life or intelligence. And he says conceived of, that's a key word because it's not saying it totally is, but it's how we conceive of it in this moment, as entirely apart from the physical embodiment. It's the vital essence, force, energy of distinct from matter. And probably the definition of God or spirit is more easily understood and more readily accepted. So let's unpack that for just a moment. Put myself back on the stage here. And even though he's saying that it's different from form, different from body, in other writings, he refers to it as that everything is God, everything is spirit. And he often talks about the fact that what we experience as the material realm is God or spirit or mind in sort of frozen form. It's liquid in nature when it's in the realms of spirit or soul or in the non-material. And that when we think something into existence, this world, this material world, then it really is let's bring my quote back here. It really is just a matter of the perspective of how he's looking at it. In other words, spirit in its conscious aspect, as he breaks it into the universe, is seen as separate from this world of the material. But when we see it as the all and define spirit as all, spirit is in everything. And so what we experience as form is actually liquid spirit temporarily frozen into a state in which we experience. That's one way he writes that. So again, I know I didn't describe that as well as I wanted to, but hopefully you're getting the gist of what I'm trying to experience here. The nature of being is a unity with three distinct attributes: spirit, soul, and body. Again, I'm trying to get you to see that he refers to spirit as being the all, and then he takes it and divides spirit up. So don't get confused by that. He's getting into referencing the fact that everything is spirit. The everything behind this universe, including everything we experience in the world of form, is spirit. But then when we want to try to understand it, and we're using words are simply those boundaries of descriptors that we use in this realm, material realm, to try to explain things. When we use the words, he then divides spirit up into three words, that one of them is also spirit. The conscious thinking aspect of this universe is spirit in one aspect. That is liquid mind that then gets frozen into form. Spirit is the active and self-conscious principle. Spirit is first cause or God, the absolute essence of all it is. It is the great or universal I am. Spirit is conscious mind and is the power which knows itself. It is conscious being. Think about that. Think about it. Spirit is the active and self-conscious principle. We've been saying that. It's that part that knows, it's aware of itself. It's also first cause. What do we mean by first cause? It means what causes something, what puts something in motion. In our humanness and in a materialistic perspective, we tend to think that if everything is matter, it's like billiard balls on a table. If I hit one ball and it hits another ball, then the reaction of that ball, we tend to point to the first balls hitting it as the creation aspect. So we tend to think all these knocking around in the material world is creating things. Holmes referred to those as second or secondary causes. The first cause was whatever put the thing in motion to begin with. So what put the world into motion? God or spirit. What put the motion of the balls into spirit? Well, if we're playing billiards, to use my metaphor here, the thought within me that took the pool cue to strike the ball, that thought was the creative process that allowed all the stuff to flow. So everything ultimately in the universe, if you can track it back, was created by a conscious thought. The conscious thought is God or spirit, first cause. And then whatever we see as terms of things hitting each other and affecting everything else in the world of form is a secondary cause. Okay. The greater universal I am. We often talk about meditating on the fact of what is I am. What is I am? And I am, when we are in meditation and meditate on I am or we're meditating on an energetic understanding and connection with the spirit that we know that is within us. And so meditation is often seen as a means of turning off our attention to the outer world and turning our attention inward to the inner flow of spirit. So when we do that and focus on the great I am, we're focusing on the spirit as it's moving through us. Spirit's conscious mind and is the power which knows itself. Spirit knows itself, and the part that knows us is that aspect of spirit moving through us. It's conscious being. Being with a capital B means God. Anytime you see capitalized words, we're talking about it, the macrocosm. And so conscious being in the aspect of the totality of the entire universal aspect, that part that knows itself and is conscious is also spirit. Hey, Roy, glad to see you dialing in from Fort Morgan, connecting in this morning. Again, if you're watching live, love for you to drop a comment where you're from. Be sure to interrupt me. Post a question or a comment if I'm not being clear. And I recognized a minute ago I was describing some stuff that I felt like I'm not being clear. I have that internal thought going on that. But I'm trying to, if I have any kind of key thing that I take away is to recognize spirit gets used by different purposes by Holmes when you're reading him. Spirit means God. Spirit also means that conscious aspect of God. And it depends on the perspective or referencing or how he's using the term in that moment. Here's another quote from this chapter 3. The spirit is self-propelling. It's absolute in all. It's self-existent and has all life within itself. Let me just stop there. Again, I'm talking about the spirit that transcends the circle of the teaching symbol. If everything in that teaching symbol is dividing spirit up into conscious thoughts, the law, and body, he's talking about the entire circle and what transcends the circle, thoughts outside the circle. So that's the absolute. It is the word, and the word is volition. Word capital there is just, word is another esoteric word to mean, in the beginning there was the word from the Bible. Well, that's a way of saying that that's a movement of consciousness of God. It has choice because it has volition. Volition is another term for free will, or the ability to make choices between things. It's will because it chooses. It's free spirit because it knows nothing outside itself and therefore nothing different from itself. Spirit, at the ultimate levels of the macrocosm, spirit knows nothing outside of itself and therefore nothing different from itself, but it knows everything that's part of us. Now, we only can claim and know spirit at the level of our awareness. That's why often talks about something called mental equivalence, where we're trying to expand our consciousness upward to encompass more and more of the understanding of spirit, because the more we can do that, the more we can see the truth of what's going on in the world and create that world, the greatest possible world for ourselves. So a lot of our personal development is to expand our consciousness outward and outward and outward, like a circle of a sphere of consciousness moving beyond us, where we take in and understand a greater aspect of the oneness of all life. I like this quote. There's some things we can break down on this one. Spirit is the mother, father, God, because it is the principle of unity back of all things. We stop there. What is mother, father, God? Why that? He's trying to get at the fact that God is, we often, from a biblical standpoint, the father. We hear that, but he's reminding us that God is both the father and the mother, that there is both both aspects of the creative force are within us. That maternal aspect of the mother is within us. That part that receives something and makes something of it is the mother. The part that is consciously thinking is the father. So in the teaching symbol, the top two symbols represent the masculine and the feminine, or the mother, father. aspects, the father being at the top, mother at the bottom. We tend to, in our human perspective, want to say, oh, it's a very masculine, men-oriented, matriarchal kind of teaching. But it's not. This is more of a mystical teaching that says that everything is one, and that the masculine can't exist without the feminine. These are simply words we use to try to be like the fingers pointing at the moon, and we focus on the fingers when the moon is what we're trying to see and experience, this divineness of God and all and how it works. And so when we break it into father, mother, or in the next sentence, the masculine and feminine, it's simply a way of us in our human level trying to make sense of it. Let's go to the next sentence. And the masculine and the feminine principles come both from the one. Now, since we're all expressions of the one, we all have both the masculine and the feminine principles within us. Now, let me back up and just say, from our human perspective, as a human being, forgetting that we're spiritual beings, we look at it and just thinking we're humans, and I say, oh, you're both masculine and feminine. Well, no, I'm a man. No, I'm a woman. And we're identifying with our physical sex in that moment. And what we're talking about here is more of a mystical understanding of masculine and feminine, which is getting at the sense that the masculine is that part of the divine that has the idea or thought represented by perhaps the seed in the form. And then the feminine is the part that receives the idea and creates something out of it. Think of it as the egg. So when the seed hits the egg, it then creates the person. And the person has both aspects of the masculine and the feminine. They have both the ability to create the idea and the ability to take the idea and act upon it. So when we talk about masculine and feminine principles and the mystical aspects of spiritual teachings, we're talking about that aspect of thought that created the idea is the masculine, and the part that receives the idea and acts upon it is the feminine. So on the teaching symbol, that's why the top, creative, conscious mind is the masculine, and the middle aspect, the law, or that acts upon and receives it, is the feminine. But that has little to do with physical sex. If you want to look at it another way, in the physical realm, we tend to define this masculine and feminine things by physical characteristics of how we were born, what body type, masculine or male or female. And so, but as we move into the realm of mind, we start seeing there's also an aspect of us that encompasses both. And that's why we have a lot of debate going on now upon people who are concerned about the fact that they say, no, gender is what you're born with. And there's people who say gender is it is fluid. And they're actually true. At both levels, they're true. And it's all a perspective kind of thing, to be honest. If you're stuck at the physical level and that's how you look at things, you're going to see physical bodies as being the ultimate truth. And if you're coming from it from a mind perspective, or a perspective of understanding that gender is not the physical body, gender is the idea or awareness within the mental construct of the individual, then you see that gender can be fluid and flow back and forth. But what we then talk about it at the spiritual level transcends both of those. We're talking about a creative process at spirit, where the masculine and the feminine are intertwined in spirit. And they're just terms we use to define the thought that creates and the action that acts upon it. Because this entire universe is a movement through thought and act upon the thought and act upon the thought. That's what the entire universe is. Okay. Let's move on with a quote. Spirit is all life, truth, love, being, cause, and effect. Notice all those are capitalized. They're all aspects of God. Spirit is life. Life is God. Truth for ultimate truth. Again, if you see truth with a small t, it's relative truth, world of human, capital T, truth. It's truth at the greatest levels of truth. Same with love. We have human love and we have divine love. Every one of these can be seen from the spiritual level of life, or they can be seen from the material, physical level of life. And there we sit in that middle realm of mind, deciding where are we going to look? Are we going to move our mind upward into spirit? Are we going to move it downward into form? Are we going to stay anchored in the further reaches away from the divine truth? Or are we going to move it upward into God? And that's why spiritual practices are so important. The spirit can know nothing outside itself. That would be God and something else. And like we said, there is nothing else but God. Back to that chart where I was showing you that God is the entire circle and outside the circle as well, spirit. I feel like I'm wound up, but if you have a sentence or comment, I am happy to go down any realm. I realize we're running towards the end here, but I'll just keep going. Spirit is all, the center and circumference of everything that exists, both manifest and unmanifest. It has no enemies, no differences, no otherness, no apartness, no separation from itself. It is undivided, complete and perfect within itself, having no opposites and no opposition. It knows only its ability, and since it is all, it cannot be hindered in any way, shape, or manner. What's he talking about there? He's talking about spirit as the all. Spirit at the all that encompasses the all. Okay. Yes, spirit as us, with our limited aspects of awareness in our human realm, we know apartness. We know separation. We divide things up. We see things as imperfect. We understand and feel and sense the opposites. We feel like we can be hindered. The whole idea is moving from a level of spiritual immaturity to a level of spiritual maturity. Moving from a level of I'm this separate individual entity in this world of form, that I am a victim to what's going on out there, to moving to seeing how you have a creative ability in the process, to seeing how the whole process is unfolding through you as an individualized expression of this one, I should say. And that ultimately to see the entire process is you as God is this process. So the more we can move our consciousness to expansion to see that, but we have to start where we are. We have to start in the human realm. We have to start with all our stories. We have to start by taking at the aspects of ourself that we have divided off in our awareness. We have to heal our shadows, to reunite our shadow with our persona. We have to then move on and reunite our awareness of ourselves as more than these forms and more than just a mind and a body. The mind and body are all one. We have to move on to see that the distinction that we make between us and others is incorrect. It's a growth or evolution or maturity process that each of us are going through to remembering truth. This is called wholeness. We see ourselves in parts, and we're moving back to wholeness. And that's what all of Science of Mind is about. And so understanding the concept of spirit, and spirit as being this underlying energy of unity of all that is, and that we then take that underlying unity and in our minds use these three concepts of spirit, mind, and body, or spirit, soul, and body, and see them as just a roadmap to help us understand how we can move beyond the differences in the forms and the stories we tell ourselves, and to transcend it. It's often said that the purpose of any spiritual teaching is to help us navigate the world, to navigate this physical world. So Science of Mind teaches us to change our thinking so that we can deal with this world in which we look out and see. But ultimately, the real purpose of any spiritual teaching is to help us transcend this world, to help us point us to the direction of unity and wholeness. And so when you look out and you think about your teachings and what you've learned with Science of Mind, I want you to encourage yourself to look at how is this working for you, making your life better in this earthly world, your human life? And then ultimately, how is it also pointing you and helping you transcend the human life? Not to leave it and not be involved in it, but to see it from a higher level, to understand the unity, the non-dual aspects of life itself, and then to come back with that awareness and live your life from that shape and that aspect. Creation does not mean making something out of nothing. Creation is the passing of spirit into form. It is eternally going on. Spirit, through conscious thinking, the masculine principle being acted upon by the feminine principle, is consciously creating and moving into a temporary state. It's taking the fluid nature of spirit and moving it into a solid state temporarily for us to experience. Another way of saying that is it's moving through the reflectors of consciousness to create the reflection that we see as the world out there. It's necessary that soul and body should exist, those two aspects, because without them, manifestation would only construct a dream world, never coming to self-realization. Notice the capitals there, self-realization. Holmes is telling us that the only way that we as individual aspects of the one can come back into returning ourselves to the realization of God or the one or spirit, that's what's called self-realization in so many traditions, is when you realize self with a capital S, you're realizing the unity and non-duality of the universe. But the only way we can do that is by going out and experiencing the duality. And the only way we can experience that is by having this process of soul and body. That then we then get this experience of duality to move through, and then come back and understand non-duality without going through. It's sort of like the hero's journey. We have to go out and experience it, and then come back and know the home for the first time in its own way. Okay. I have talked this morning, and I see that we are at the closing time. I do want to thank you who have hung in with me this morning. I appreciate you listening, and hopefully you got something from this. I hope that this served you in some capacity. I do have some sort of a I just want to remind you that if you like you like the content that I do, please consider going to my website, subscribing to it. Also, you'll find my blogs and videos there. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Subscribe to the newsletter. I'm going to be having a newsletter coming out shortly, outlining some new projects that are coming from me, separate from all of this. And so I encourage you to go to the website and to, again, consciousbridge.com. And I want to thank you for any of the comments that you've posted today, or were at least in your mind, whether you posted them or not. I want you to remind you that here on the Science of Mind Saturday Morning Conversations, this is a program, and it comes to you from the New Thought Media Network. And I want you to be sure that you support the New Thought Media Network. Be sure to go to ntmedia.org, click on the donate button. Encourage you to do that so you can keep programming like this coming to you. And also, I want to thank you for being with me this morning. I want you to thank you for thinking about this, and I want you to thank you for being you. Remember, what brings you joy? What brings you joy? And remember that the joy that you feel, you are experiencing for the bliss of the divine, that everything that you experience is an experience through spirit, through God. And what kind of experiences are you creating today and every day? Thanks for watching. Till next time.